Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode here at the Damage Report under lockdown. And I don't want to wait even a second more before I introduce our guest, Jordan, because his cat is lurking in the background. It's just adorable. The cat is ready to strike.
Yeah. I mean, during setup, she was kind of running around, but I think once you said it, we're going live, she got into position. She's ready.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, oh, there she goes. Okay, so everybody, we started off early with pets, and now we can all just relax. We don't need to worry about whether one will appear. One already did. But anyway, Jordan, thank you for joining us. Everybody in the chat room, thank you for being here as well. We've got a gigantic show planned for you. Very weird news. The cops can run you over, and it's not illegal. It's not even against their guidelines, apparently, and that's from them. We've got white supremacist conspiracies in the army. We've got people chanting about the KKK. We've got the president just making explicitly racist comments. And we've got the next rally. We're gonna evaluate, Jordan and I, how this might compare to the last in terms of possibly being a super spreader event or something along those lines. So you might recall the massive amount of police brutality against protesters over the past month and a half or so. A lot of people, maybe even watching this, might have been exposed to some of the lowlights of that sort of police brutality thanks to the work of Jordan, who's on the show with us now, who's done some great montages of this brutality. Well, one of the incidents that I believe was in your first montage was cops in New York seemingly stopped by a group of protesters in their police SUV, deciding, you know what, we're not waiting, we're just going to barrel forward into these mass protesters. So the NYPD Commissioner was asked about this incident by the New York AG, and take a look at what he had to say about it.
Where you saw two police cars basically drive into a crowd of protesters. I believe it was on Flatbush Avenue. Are you familiar with that incident?
I am intimately familiar with that incident.
And was that in violation of your use of force policy?
No. That our Internal Affairs Bureau investigated this information, and preliminarily we have an accounting of that incident where we have officers in a situation where they're essentially being penned in by protesters. I think that's plainly evident if you review all of the facts. It's on the heels of several other incidents where that same tactic was used, also caught on video and available for anyone to see, where people are penning in police vehicles and then pelting it with a number of items, including bricks, including garbage cans, and trying to assault the officers. So that was the incident in which you are referring to.
So, Jordan, before we jump in, just in case people aren't familiar with exactly the incident we're talking about, you all just heard how the commissioner described it, that they were penned in, they were being assaulted, they had to do what they did, so it wasn't a use of force. Okay, with that, let's take a look at what the actual video was. So, you saw it. I mean, obviously, Jordan, you're familiar with this video. So what do you think about the commissioner's description of what happened?
I mean, NYPD saw this clip and said, oh, we investigated ourselves and we found no wrongdoing. I mean, that's a perfect, succinct example of the problem. Like, you can't have a weaponized militaristic force tasked with protecting and serving the populace, and the only accountability measure is an internal investigation. Mm-hmm. That's just you're setting the stage for rampant corruption, and as it manifests here, it's violence against people, protesters. I mean, you have a right to protest freely and peacefully, and you're like, mm-hmm. It's not unreasonable to expect people would throw something at a car that's driving into a crowd of people. I mean, what, like, it's a totally understandable reaction. So for NYPD, I don't know. This is just par for the course of the NYPD. We've seen clip after clip after clip of rampant abuse, of grotesque violence from NYPD. They've shown no remorse. They've shown no accountability, and they're fighting off any type of oversight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm happy that they're even being asked about it at all, because it seems like a lot of, like, so much of it they just got away with. Like, the videos went around, people got outraged, it generated more protest, yes, and occasionally consequences. A cop put on, temporarily paid leave or something like that. A few were fired, but considering the severity of the violence we saw, how widespread it was across so many cities, the vast majority of them just got away with it. And that video right there, the commissioner was like, they were penned in, being assaulted with bricks and all of that, so they had to do it. Another car came up from behind them. Presumably the road was at least relatively open, unless you're asserting that car had just cut through another crowd. They could have backed up. They could have not moved. Does anyone believe that if they hadn't gunned the engine there, the next thing that would have happened was that the cops would have been killed? Does anyone think that? No, but he thinks that what they did was actually better. They were being horrendously assaulted, so they just did what they had to do. No, first of all, I didn't see a single brick. Yeah, there was garbage being thrown. I saw a police cone being thrown. The cops were in no danger. Those people were in danger from the violence of the cops. And with all the power that we give the police, are we not allowed to expect them to utilize a little bit more restraint, a little bit more responsibility, that maybe you can just chill for a little bit rather than risking killing people? Apparently no one was horribly injured, which to me is amazing. I'm shocked that they weren't. I mean, I think most people focus on the car that was up against the barricades, but the other car that comes through is just hitting people, and thankfully none of them tripped. If they had, they could have been killed.
Yeah, and this wasn't even the only instance of NYPD hitting people with their cars. There was another clip that NYPD there's several cars driving down the street. One of them opened their door and deliberately hit somebody as they passed him. What is that? Does that violate the protocol?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and here's the thing. Like, of course, these things, we all know. Any rational person watching that clip knows that is excessive force. That's an abuse of power. But because of the way the police and the police unions operate, like, there's not going to be any accountability, because, it's tasked with, like, internal investigations, and there's all of this red tape because of the police union contracts to stop and prevent any outside oversight. So, like, the heart of this issue is police unions and how they are the ultimate roadblock to progress on this front. So I would encourage people to read up on, like, there's multiple different resources. I can't name them all, but there's so many different compendiums and resources that break down each police department's union contract and what that does specifically in accountability, like how police unions get multiple days when there's incidents like this to get their story straight before they come out and, like, respond to allegations or incident reports. Like, there's so many different measures. That's just one that they use, and these tactics that they employ to prevent any type of consequences from ever impacting their department after incidents like this.
Yeah, and, like, if I hesitate to ask this question because I'm worried how some people will respond, but if a bunch of people go in front of my car, am I allowed to run them over? Apparently, if you're penned in, if you're scared, you get to. Of course, the issue is that a significant number of conservatives do believe that if protesters pen you, and you should be able to kill them, you or the cops. I think that's madness. Are you being inconvenienced? Sure. Is that frustrating? Sure. Do you get to kill someone as a result? I would say no. I really hope not. Right. And I guess in this case, it's not even a few bad apples. Like, those apples weren't bad, is the NYPD's point of view. That commissioner is saying to all of their officers, if you find yourself in a situation like this, literally the most dangerous thing that I can imagine you doing is acceptable, as long as you feel inconvenienced, as long as there's, you're really going to go into reverse. I mean, come on, that would take extra time. But one extra comment I want to read came a little bit later on when Letitia James asked, so in that particular instance, is it your testimony that the police car was an appropriate use of force? And take a look at this answer. I'm not saying that the police car was used as a use of force. The officers were set upon and attacked, and thankfully they were able to get out of that situation with, to my knowledge, no injuries to anyone. So doesn't even admit that it's not that it's that it's excessive force. It's not force at all. That is nothing to me. Like, it's Westworldian. Like, I'm looking at the video, and that's not brutality. It's not that it's acceptable brutality, it's not even brutality. They're refusing to even admit that this is a dangerous thing that the cops were doing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of response you're going to get from a like I said, a militaristic, weaponized force who's been trained to shoot first and ask questions later, with no outside accountability. Mm-hmm. I mean, any admission on that front would just open the door to more inroads, on, like in inquisitions and examinations of their practices and scrutiny of their behavior. So, of course, they're going to say that nothing happened, because what are we going to do? Because of the power that they have and the leverage that they have through the police union and like the control they have over the government, like there's nothing you can do in response. So that's why we need to have a serious discussion around defunding and abolishing the police, reallocating those resources to other things, like social workers, like trained like licensed therapists, counselors, all of these different types of professions and specialists for people who can respond to situations, who have expertise in that area, not just someone showing up with a gun.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Not just someone with a gun who seems to have been handpicked from amongst the most scared people in America. Like, we choose the most constantly terrified people and then arm them and say, if you get scared, you can do literally anything you want. So Cyrus Silly, to some, it says in Super Chat, when used against police cars are lethal weapons. Yeah, exactly. If a bunch of police penned in your car, you think you're allowed to run them over? I have a feeling they might consider that a real threat. But it also makes me remember the classic thing that happened. I forget which protest. It might have been in San Diego. But it was when a protester, the cops launched tear gas canisters at them, and a protester picked one up and threw it back, and they charged the protester with assault with a deadly weapon. That's amazing. That is
incredible.
So you almost got to respect that, but you don't.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Kai Allen says, New York 15 here. This morning I voted for Bernie and Samalis Lopez. Thank you so much, John, for everything you and the family, the TYT family do for us. I so appreciate you for TYT News, Laughs, and Sanity. Love you guys. Thank you, Kai. Yeah, Samalis and all the others in New York are up. You know, many of these candidates have been on the show over the past year or two, and it's going to be a big night. I mean, there's been some good primary nights this election. There have been some really bad ones. I've been watching Nabila Islam lose. That was really rough in Atlanta. And so we are going to be doing live coverage. Definitely join us. I'm going to be in 1 hour of the coverage with Cenk Uygur and Benjamin Dixon. We're going to be doing some initial returns analysis Jordan, are there any elections in particular you're keeping your eye on tonight?
I mean, I'm watching Jamal Bowman and I'm watching Charles Booker. Those are the two that I really hope pull it out. Those are, pretty good progressive guys. I would love to see Booker against McConnell in Kentucky. That'd be great. And Jamal Bowman unseating Elliot Engel, who is just, pretty much showed everyone his true colors a couple weeks ago when he said that if he didn't have a primary, he wouldn't care.
100%.
So, as we talked about before the show, it's a lot of it's going to come down to voter suppression. There's huge cuts and rollbacks in how many polling places there are in Kentucky, which forces people into long lines. And I told you, a couple of anecdotes of people that I had heard from in Kentucky who were getting empty envelopes when they requested an absentee ballot or weren't allowed to have an absentee ballot. So things like that. I mean, just not great when you really need a robust progressive turnout. And part of that is absentee voting. So
yeah,
we'll see. But all eyes on Kentucky tonight.
Yeah, and a lot of people are mentioning that they closed down about 95% of the polling places. Which, okay, it's a pandemic. I get that, but the whole thing is get people to not vote in public, but give them the way to do so otherwise. Not just we're not going to do anything. We're just going to make it way harder to vote in public. And by the way, if you still want to exercise your democratic rights and vote in public, now you can expect that 10 times as many people are going to be at each polling location. So that seems like a great idea. I think Booker, those are about the two highest profile. I mean, there's a lot, but for Booker to beat McGrath, I think would be great because McGrath got the official nod of the Democratic Party, raised millions and millions of easy dollars that have nothing to do with her, and her opposition to Medicare for All and other programs like that, as well as seeming to campaign based on being able to achieve more with Trump than the current Republican is madness. So that would be great. But Bowman winning for me might be more immediately exciting because it's a blue district. So he would effectively be in. Whereas Booker, that would be great, but is still going to have an incredibly difficult election in the general election. Bowman would basically be in it. Which would be very exciting. And no nicer person to have it happen to, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Jamal Bowman, just everything that we're seeing, just seems like a great person. And would be a great member of Congress because he's a middle school principal. He's just everyday person. He can relate to the common struggle. He's proximate to the problems, which is something that you need to really understand how we can get systemic reforms. This guy's great. He's not out of touch. He's not a career politician. He's not just showing up because he has a primary like Engel, and he's not taking millions from Trump backers just to beat his opponent like Engel is. So around just every possible way you look at it, Jamal Bowman just seems like the ideal candidate there.
Yeah, the fact that he's getting Republican money, not directly, but the Republicans are like, no, we need Engel. That should be a major heads up. Yeah. The fact that Hillary Clinton came out of the woods to do her first endorsement and it was Elliot Engel. Come on. I know that we're not always going to win these big ones. It's a shock when we do, but man, would it be nice, especially considering all that we've been through this year, to see Jamal win tonight. So anyway, that coverage is going to be on TYT. There's going to be a lot of great guests going to be joining us, including, by the way, Jamal Bowman, who we're going to be doing an interview with, but Ida Rodriguez is going to be there, Michael Shore, Cenk Uygur, Benjamin Dixon, like I said, and a number of other people. So definitely stay tuned later on today for that. There was a protest in Branson, Missouri against the Dixie Outfitters store for the alleged connection between one of the owners of the store and the KKK. And I want to show you a little bit of what one of the counter-protesters did there. So these are people, flying the Confederate flag and then also shouting about what they intend to teach their grandchildren. Okay, so if shouting at the Black Lives Matter protesters, I'm going to teach my grandchildren to hate all of you, wasn't clear enough, and the little shimmy with the Confederate battle flag wasn't enough, the KKK life chant, that sells the message. I get where she's coming from now.
Yeah, how much longer are people going to try to pretend this is about heritage and not hate, as they say? I mean, people have had emo phases longer than the Confederacy existed. So, I'm not. It's true. Think about it. It's true. We all make mistakes, and that's a pretty bad one. But like I'm just saying.
Are you admitting? Did you?
No, I quickly transitioned into pop punk, and then I got into metal. So
there you go. There you go. And you've been living that life ever since.
Yeah. It's called a glow up.
Wow, I didn't expect to have so much fun with this story, but yeah, you're right. No, like, and I was thinking about this morning. So, are you guys still going to be like cheering about the Confederacy in 10 years? In 50 years? In 200 years? Is that still the thing that you're going to be drawing your personal pride from? Like, has the South not done anything since then that maybe you could focus on a little bit? Like a sports dynasty or a cuisine, There's nothing since then, just the treason and the slavery and stuff like that. God. Right.
Yeah, this is I don't know. I try to, like, when I talk to people who aren't like, as clued in on this issue, it's just like, why does it matter? Like, let them just do what they want. Well, it's like, think about any other conflict, any other armed conflict. Let's just pick one. Let's say Vietnam, arguably much more gray area of who came out of that on top. Much more gray area. You would never let the Vietnamese fly a flag here, ever. You would never let any other country fly a flag here that we had been in a military conflict with, especially if they lost. So why would you do that here? And this, like, that video underscores what this is really about. This is about, white supremacy is about trying to establish dominance, and it's about inflicting terror into a black community. They're trying to intimidate and scare their black neighbors, their black community members, because this has, like we said at the onset, this is nothing about heritage, because there is no heritage. It's about white supremacy. It's about hatred, and deep down, these people are evil. So this is grotesque, but they're saying the quiet part loud here.
Yeah, and it's like, I know that the right loves to say, like, the left and their identity politics. That's all this is. It's you identify with a mythical conception of what that time and place were about, such that people outside of the Confederacy love the flag, racists love the flag, because of what it obviously stands for, and then what they won't admit that it stands for, but it does clearly stand for. Okay, so I want to turn to this particular store, because this is a protest against one place. Dixie Outfitters says on its website that it's dedicated to preserving, showing pride in, and educating others about true Southern history and the Southern way of life through art and apparel. I had never heard of this place before, and honestly, 20 minutes after we stopped talking about the store, I'm not going to remember anymore. But I understand now, after going to their website, why some people have a problem with it, beyond just the fact that its owner apparently was once connected to the KKK, according to newspaper reports. So I went through, and I plucked out just a few of their t-shirts to show you. So some are what you might expect. Things like this, with the Confederate flag, and a bunch of people from the Confederacy saying that they're heroes, effectively. That's, including, by the way, Nathan Bedford Forrest. So just in case it wasn't clear where this is coming from, KKK founders are heroes. You've got Trump with the Confederate flag when he's from New York. Like, he's a New York tower living golden elite. I don't get it. But anyway, with the Punisher skull, which the right has now co-opted to mean the police are allowed to kill whoever they want, especially if the people they're killing are not white. So you get that. You've got, let's see, I'll never abandon my Southern heritage to comfort your ignorance, with a skull. There's a little bit of ignorance on display, I'm just going to admit. But then there's weird stuff like, why is Baby Yoda on a Confederate flag? Honestly, like, I feel like they're just trying to make money now. I don't think Baby Yoda was in the Confederacy.
That's extremely under copyright.
You can't. So no, I checked. Disney okayed this.
Oh, yeah, Disney's cool with it.
You can't put Baby Yoda on a Confederate flag. And then, by the way, and I don't know Dixie Outfitters. They have a lot of animal shirts. Go look at their website. These are some of the worst shirts I've ever seen in my life. I think the Yoda one is just funny, but anyway, what a thing, man. There's so much that hypothetically to be proud of, that you've accomplished, that your family has accomplished, things that weren't 130 years ago and treasonous. I just won't understand it, ever. But I appreciate that people are trying to push back a little bit against this, because that's the only way progress is going to come. And I know that the response is going to be, well, this is part of our history. There was a great tweet. It might have been from Maura Quint. I forget exactly. But she said, I know that something bad happened in Germany a long time ago, but we don't know what because they took down all the statues. Like, that's not actually how it works. We're still going to have historians analyzing this. Anyway, frustrating. Last night, news broke of a plot from inside of the U.S. military that thankfully was foiled back in May that could have resulted in the deaths of multiple of our soldiers, with the threat coming from within. Let me catch you up a little bit. An Army private confessed to sharing secret information with a satanic neo-Nazi group in a plot to attack his own unit while it was overseas and cause the deaths of as many of his fellow service members as possible, apparently according to him. This is federal prosecutors making this case yesterday in Manhattan. The private, whose name is Ethan Felon Melzer, was charged in an indictment unsealed this week with collaborating with the Order of the Nine Angles, or O9A, a group that prosecutors described as an occult-based neo-Nazi and racially motivated violent extremist group, which apparently had been collaborating with, and I'm not kidding, which should be clear, with a group called Rapewaffen. But anyway, a number of international, white supremacist groups like that. This group's followers apparently not only admire people like Adolf Hitler, but also Osama bin Laden. So you might describe them as a more cosmopolitan white supremacist international terror group. But anyway, Jordan, so this guy, joined the military to then provide information about unit movements and defensive capabilities so that they could be wiped out. It's just a truly amazing story that I don't see enough focus on today.
Yeah, we've seen from other folks like Ken Klippenstein and people at Media Matters who have been tracking, and Right Wing Watch with Jared Holt, we've seen people track and identify white supremacists and hate group members who are in the military. And you have to question, why is there this influx, and why is this an issue and so prevalent in the military? And you have to think about the jingoism and the xenophobia inherent and embedded in military mindset. When we have a system where people elsewhere are treated as others and subhuman, you have to think about what type of person that might attract. So, this is pretty disturbing. Glad that this person was identified and caught, but still, this isn't the only one. There's so many more. We've seen it time and time again, and you gotta examine why this is happening, because this isn't just this isn't an anomaly. This happens all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there have been reports going back about KKK continued influence over police departments across the country, which, if you know anything about the development of police departments, should not really be a shock, but also about white supremacist infiltration of the military, especially apparently including the special forces. And it just doesn't seem to be taken seriously. Now, one potential reason for that is that, the investigations into domestic terror, right-wing groups that would be doing this sort of infiltrating and online radicalization has been defunded, and the organizations designed to investigate that sort of thing have been taken apart. All of this, by the way, textbook political correctness from the right. That they don't like the political implications of a thing that's being investigated, so they shut it down. They don't actually care that it's a threat. They just don't like the fact that information could come out about it. And so, what do you know? These plots continue to develop. Now, in this particular case, thankfully, it was stopped. But are we to believe that this Army private is the only person doing this sort of thing? That the Order of the Nine Angles, or whatever the hell it is, that they're only talking to one person? And so now you have to wonder, what about the plots that actually succeeded? What would that look like to an outsider? It would look like soldiers that had turned up dead. Now, perhaps it would be in Europe, like in this case, but what if they were sharing information, like not just admiring Osama bin Laden, but actually sharing information with terror groups in the Mideast? Have we lost soldiers because of incidents like this? All of this is speculation. I have no idea, but how would we know? And the issue is that it doesn't seem like anyone is taking white supremacy seriously enough, and especially the threat of them getting involved in things like police departments and the military, where they can wreak real havoc, that they can get the training, they can get the weapons, and they can potentially do a great deal of harm.
Yeah, I mean, and as we've seen with people like this, and one of the shooters at a protest recently, is the ultimate ploy here is to try to inspire what they call a race war. They want some sort of conflict and dynamic that pits two groups of people, whites and people of color, against each other, so we have some sort of armed racial conflict. That's their ultimate goal. And this is, a deeply held white supremacist belief and viewpoint, and as it manifests, it results in death and violence and mass casualties. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to be vigilant.
Exactly, and I'll just remind people that it was just early last year that a Coast Guard lieutenant and self-described white nationalist, surprisingly, was charged with plotting to kill a number of different journalists and Democratic politicians. I don't know where a terrorist like this would get this list of journalists and politicians. I don't know where. We've never seen anything like this, Caesar Sayoc, or anything like that. But thankfully, that person was stopped as well. But this is hardly the only instance of terrorism coming from inside of our military. Maybe it's time that we take it seriously. But of course, that isn't going to happen, at least while Trump is in office. At his Tulsa rally, Donald Trump didn't speak for very long about coronavirus, but he did just long enough to fit in a little racist joke about it, referring to COVID-19 as Kung Flu, which we had heard months ago aides of his were using around the White House. Now, he apparently did it. He was asked, Kayleigh McEnany, I should say, was asked about this. Here is how she responded.
Last July, President Trump declared himself the least racist person there is anywhere in the world. Why does he use racist phrases like the Kung Flu?
The president doesn't. What the president does do is point to the fact that the origin of the virus is China. It's a fair thing to point out.
Okay, so when I said that she was responding to him doing it, I should be clear, she just denied that he did it. But we're going to talk about this, and for us to do that, we need to acknowledge that, no, he did actually do it.
If you could have seen outside, or if you could have heard the reports, oh, it's COVID, it's this, by the way, it's a disease, without question, has more names than any disease in history. I can name Kung Flu, I can name 19 different versions of names.
Okay, that's not what the 19 refers to in it, but just to be clear, he did it, and we let the video play so that you knew that the fans of his just loved him using that term, and they laughed uproariously.
Yeah, it's racist. I mean,
that's all it is.
I don't know. I mean, nothing's surprising anymore. And no one on the right will care. No one in power on the right or in a position to kind of check him will do anything about it. Nobody on the right media will do anything about it. And then the media outside of like places like this show will kind of just like gloss over it and maybe just like both sides type of thing, and have people from the right on to defend him when it's pretty objective. Like it's pretty clear what he's trying to do. He's not just saying this because it's like it makes sense. He's doing it to like we saw, draw a laugh, and that laugh isn't just because it's like comical. It's because it's rooted in racism and xenophobia. So time and time again he's done this and no one really seems to care. And then coupled with the story we just talked about, white supremacists embedded in the military, it's just terrifying what this trend is showing, what this trend line is reflecting. We're going to see more instances of racist attacks on Asian Americans. This isn't This is kind of scary. This is going to continue because this thing isn't going away as much as the right wants it to disappear. This is going to be with us for a while. And as they continue to hammer this point that is like some xenophobic point, that the way that manifests in real life is xenophobic attacks on Asian Americans.
100%. It's just a racist joke. That's all it is. And he knows that that's what they want. That's why, like, he says he can name 19. That's the one name he had, was the most racist version. So he went into that rally being comfortable knowing two things. One, my white fans are the type that will love racist jokes. Just make a joke about Asian culture, and they'll think it's funny. And also, there probably won't be virtually any Asian people there. I don't need to worry about that. This is going to be a pretty white group. So, very comfortable there. And then they did laugh because they do like racist humor. That's all it is. And I understand, compared to many other things that he's doing, is this the most damaging thing? Perhaps not. There's other things involving coronavirus. The fact that he's literally doing almost nothing to stop it spread, that is worse. But Asian Americans have been harassed. They have been assaulted. They have been discriminated against based on the right's campaign against them to try to distract people from the reality of the virus and get them to just be mad at Asian Americans. That has been the actual strategy. And it involves a little interesting bit of mental flexibility on the part of his followers, that they have to simultaneously believe that this virus is a big hoax, the numbers are made up, and it's not a threat, but also it devastated us, and it's all China's fault that it did it. Like, whichever version of that they're currently holding in their head trumps off the hook, which is what makes it such a nice little ploy. But it is interesting that they're doing that. Now, I want to give you a little bit of the reporter's follow-up to Kayleigh's denial. She said he didn't say it when you just saw that he did say it. And here was her follow-up question.
What are you saying by using the racist phrase Kung Flu?
He is linking it to its place of origin.
What does he have to say to Asian Americans who are deeply offended and worried that his use will lead to further attacks of discrimination?
So the president has said very clearly it's important that we totally protect our Asian community in the U.S. and all around the world.
Kung Flu is extremely offensive to many people in the Asian American community. To be clear, are you saying the White House does not believe it is racist?
To be clear, I think the media is trying to play games with the terminology.
So the thing is, she was reading that response, so she knew she was going to be asked about this, and just has this canned response about, oh, no, don't target them or whatever. So she'll say that in the press conference, and then he'll go back on the trail, back on the rally trail, and he'll throw out racist jokes, demonizing Asian Americans. That's the strategy.
And no one will do anything about it. I think that's the disheartening thing, because we all know, and it's why they have responses drafted. They know it's bad. They're just not going to do anything about it. It's really depressing, honestly, because like as the reporter laid out, like, people are scared by this. They know attacks could come from this. It's going to be further discriminatory. What do you do? It's so depressing that this is what they're focusing on. This is what the president, this is what the White House, this is what the staff is focusing on right now. There's so many other issues. All they want to do is continue hammering China on some xenophobic crusade.
Yeah. And like, just to take you back a little bit more, because now the response is just, he didn't say it or whatever, just don't answer the question. But when it was going around that White House aides were using this term early on, here is what Kellyanne Conway had to say about the term Kung Flu.
But if they're, I'd like to know who they are. But hold on, you can't just say that and not name them. Tell us who it was. Come up here and tell us who it was. I'd like to know, because I'll go inside. Right now,
what is your message to those staffers?
No, I'd like to know.
Rather than having them
excuse me, that's been alleged. No, Yamiche, excuse me.
So is that wrong if it happened?
I'm not dealing in hypotheticals. Of course it's wrong. But you can't just make an accusation and not tell us who it is. Who is it?
But you're saying, of course it's wrong.
Yamiche. And that's highly offensive, so you should tell us all who it is.
Okay, so I will tell you, it was Trump. So it was wrong, it was highly offensive. And so when it was just alleged and it was staffers, then it was, well, I mean, that's so bad. Why wouldn't you just tell us? It's so unacceptable. It's weird that you're not telling us who it is. And now he does it on film. No, he didn't. He didn't do that. And if he did, whatever, he's just trying to draw attention to where China is. Like, the goalposts just slide so fast. And all of it, Kayleigh McEnany, Kellyanne Conway, they're not real people. They're just not. They're not there to give you their honest evaluation of literally anything. They are there to confuse and distract you while Trump and the GOP loots America. That's effectively it. As Jordan said, depressing. At his rally, again, to the extent that he talked about the pandemic at all, one of the scariest things that Donald Trump said was that he went off on his line about how we only have more cases because we have more tests, which is missing something crucial there. And he says, and so I tell them to slow down the testing. Now, he's been asked in the days since then, he was asked yesterday, were you just joking about that? Did you actually order the slowdown? And twice he refused to actually address the issue. He didn't claim he was joking. He just changed the subject. Now, this morning, he was asked once again about it, and here is what he had to say.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world. We test better than anybody in the world. Our tests are the best in the world, and we have the most of them. By having more tests, we find more cases. But just remember this. The reason we have more cases than other countries is because our testing is so much.
Okay, so he was asked specifically, were you just kidding? And he said, I don't kid. About whether he pushed for some sort of slowdown in testing, because in his mind, the disease only exists once you identify it, which is not actually how it works.
Yeah, John, you can't get pregnant if you don't take a test. That's how that works. So, yeah, and then we just like, it's baffling because he talked about it at the rally, and this is a common narrative that we've seen emerge. We've seen early reporting that they tried to slow it down at the onset because they were worried about spikes in cases, and ultimately this is because they're worried about his reelection chances. So because he's so self-centered and because he's prioritizing his reelection above everything else, more people are going to have this than realize. Like, more people are going to get sick, more people are going to die, and this is going to be prolonged because of his ineptitude. And what that means is millions of more people will be out of work for longer, and we won't be able to return safely, and we won't be able to return to normalcy safely because of how inept he is and his administration is. Like, it's just going to prolong this for everybody. It's only making things worse because he's so reckless with this.
Exactly. And I want to address the substance of it, but before we jump to that, I just want to acknowledge the cycle that always happens with this sort of thing, where Donald Trump says crazy thing. All of the people who are paid to defend him come out with a unified narrative. Donald Trump sets fire to the narrative. And so that has happened once again, because he's now avoided responding to the "were you just joking?" and then you just said, "I don't kid." Well, he did that after 2 days of Kayleigh McEnany saying, you guys are taking him too seriously. He was just joking, as you'll see here.
Not true.
It was a comment that he made in jest. It's a comment that he made in passing, specifically with regard to the media coverage and pointing out the fact that the media never acknowledges that we have more cases, because when you test more people, you find more cases.
Is it appropriate to joke about coronavirus when 120,000 people have died?
He was not joking about coronavirus. I just said he was joking about the media and their failure to understand the fact that when you test more, you also find more cases.
Okay, so he was joking, except not really, because that would be offensive, but he was joking, so you don't get to be mad at him, even though he has now come out and said, I don't kid. So she went to bat for him, and she will look, like, it doesn't matter that she looks ridiculous. She understands that's what she's getting paid for, but she does look ridiculous because he can't stick to the narrative. Like, he has gone rogue, and the best case scenario, what she was trying to set up, was he sees 120,000 dead and thinks this is an opportunity for me to do stand-up comedy. But the reality, apparently, what he wants you to believe is the reality is, no, he did in some way push for a slowdown of testing. Because again, as they both say, you only find more cases when you do more testing. I would finesse that a bit and say, you only find more cases when you do more testing and when there is more coronavirus ravaging our country. The cases are all over the place. Some areas have done a good job of getting it down, but in others it's rapidly spreading. And when they've spent the past couple of days once again trying to distract everyone with, it's all about China, China spread it to us, whatever happened originally, whatever lies China told, additional coronavirus cases are coming from America, from everywhere. When you can't get mad at China when Vegas right now is fully open and booming and people are walking around without masks. When Texas just yesterday, Greg Abbott said maybe people should start wearing masks again after the cases have been going up and up for a couple of weeks and they did literally nothing, where you can go to supermarkets without masks and just mingle with people and all of that. Like, it's time to take it seriously. Not jokes, not slowdowns or whatever. Like, should he be investigated for that? Sure. All the stuff that he did that made our reaction so much weaker, that drove up the death toll, should certainly be investigated. But I would hope that at least now they could take it seriously, because 120,000 is already way too many. We are on track for far more now. It's just day after day, like nobody even cares anymore. Nobody cares about this pandemic. We had a great day yesterday when like 500 people died. That was our great day. Great success as the cases continue to go up.
Yeah, I think it reflects just our society's just kind of indoctrination and kind of like, almost like we've been groomed into accepting like everything can be given to us immediately. Mm-hmm. Like we don't have any type of long-term thinking around these types of issues. Everything is just solved in a news cycle or a week. Mm-hmm. You know, we haven't had this long-term existential crisis in generations. So now we've got people who have just been, you know, conditioned into wanting instant gratification for everything, where you can get food delivered to you within the hour. You can get everything you want delivered within 2 days. They just, you know, now all of a sudden you have no end in sight for this thing, and people can't comprehend it, and people don't want to think about it. So after, you know, a distraction with a national uprising, people just don't want to talk about it anymore. People have moved on to something else. They want to return to normal, and they can't accept that this might be with us for like a year, because we might not have a vaccine for a year. They just can't comprehend it, and this is how it manifests. It's people just insisting that we reopen. We have to get back to normal, and, you know, maybe wear a mask, but in some cases in the South, no. There are some states that are deliberating going back to phase 1. So you might see a little bit of a regression there, but overall you're going to see the more defiant communities and the more defiant states just resist any type of regression on that front, and that just leads to more cases and ultimately more deaths.
Yeah. I'm sure, Jordan, you've, you know, long ago come to grips with this, but like if you want to be in this thing that we do in whatever form, you are going to be just continually disappointed with your country and with its leadership and all of that. But like the reaction to coronavirus, there was like 2 weeks where, maybe 3, where too late we came together and pretty much everyone agreed. I've seen the charts now of even right-wingers saying you gotta stay home, you gotta socially distance and all that. And then the right-wing media got involved. And Tucker Carlson and, you know, Sean Hannity and all of them made it a partisan thing to protect yourself from disease. And the lockdown started to fall apart almost immediately. And now we as a country, overall, have surrendered. There's some places that are doing a good job, even some places that are increasing, you know, like mask requirements and things like that happen in California. But to the extent that a country can surrender to a disaster, we have done that. And the cases are going to continue to rise, and God only knows what the final death count will be. But the utter disappointment, the final ultimate disappointment is, no matter what it is, it won't matter nearly as much as it should have. Like, Trump fans don't give one damn that 120,000 people have died. It doesn't sink in. They cared more about the 4 from Ebola, you know? Like, it just doesn't matter, and that is so utterly depressing to think that even if, like, Trump gets voted out or whatever, we're still going to have a country that is that ready to quit in the face of a disaster. And remember, we have other disasters that we know about that are coming. Ones related to coronavirus, including the rent and evictions and foreclosures crisis. But also, we still hypothetically would like to do something about climate change. And look at what has been normalized. 40,000 people a month dying. Who cares? You know, it's political. I don't want to get political. Donald Trump is, he wants to try again for the whole rally thing. Tulsa was kind of a bust, so he's got a new idea. It is coming up literally tonight in Arizona. The Dream City Church, a megachurch, is going to get potentially a couple thousand people together to listen to him. Now, like with Tulsa, it seems like getting this many people together is potentially dangerous. Could be, a site where we see a lot of spread of coronavirus. Well, two of the leaders of the Dream City Church say, you don't actually have to worry about this. They've got it solved. Here they are talking about their solution to COVID.
COVID-19 here at Dream City Church. We're probably the first church in the nation to...
Yeah, we've installed Clean Air EXP. We have a local Arizona company. It was technology developed by some members of our church, and we've installed these units, and it kills 99.9% of COVID within 10 minutes from independent testing.
It's ionization, is that what it is?
It's ionization of the air, and it takes particulates out, and COVID cannot live in that environment.
So when you come into our auditorium, 99% of COVID is gone, killed, if it was there in the first place. So you can know when you come here, you'll be safe and protected. Thank God for great technology, and thank God for being proactive.
Amen.
Bless you guys.
So... the system is set up and ready to go. I looked up the system a little bit, and I'm not an expert. I don't know what the likelihood is that it works. If they're doing some sort of air filtration, that seems like a very good call. This particular way, I don't understand. I would argue that based on that video, I don't think they understand. But I will say, I'm praying it works for the sake of the thousands of people that are going to pack Dream City Church.
Yeah, I'm just going to go and say it doesn't work. Because, at the onset they said, okay, this kills it within 10 minutes. Even if this system works and it does somehow kill the virus, they say it's within 10 minutes. So people come in and they have it and they're breathing and they spread it within, say, the lobby or next to you in a pew. You have 10 minutes to catch it before the system could allegedly kill it. So no, this is completely ineffective, but it shows just the absolute grift. And this is when you were teasing up this segment, I was thinking this is really the peak American fascist grift. You've got right-wing pastors capitalizing on a crisis, probably backing right-wing politicians and Trump in this front, downplaying the severity of a global pandemic and mass death. So what? They could get more people in and get their donations through their tithes. That is just pure American greed right there. Putting people in harm's way, knowing it's dangerous, lying to them so you can take their money. That is just well done. That is the American grift.
I guess I disagree a little bit. I hate grift more than almost anything in the world. I like to imagine that they believe that it will work and they believe they're being responsible. I am inclined to question myself because mega churches have a long history of being very focused on the mega more than the church and the mega dollars. But maybe the system works. I don't know. Maybe they at least think that it works. At least here's what I like. Them setting up the system literally at all is a signal to their event goers that coronavirus is a threat, which some churches through the entirety of this pandemic have just been forget it, just come in. It doesn't matter. You're gonna be fine. At least there's that bare minimum. And I get that I have been so beaten down that this is the bar that I have set. But the mayor says that the church is going to be handing out masks and taking temperatures. And so let's play a game like we played with Tulsa. Everyone there will have been handed a mask. Let's see how many wear them. Unfortunately, if you've just been told that the air is safe because they ionize that stuff, maybe they won't be wearing a mask. And the problem is, Arizona's one of those states where COVID is rising. Now, the last day on record was a little bit of a fall off from the peak. Hopefully that trend will continue, but things were getting pretty dark in Arizona, and it wasn't just a product of the testing, okay? They had way more cases. And so a big event like this is it's potentially a place where that sort of thing could spread.
Yeah, this is absolutely reckless. I think this coupled with the Trump rally really underscores just kind of how unprepared Arizona is. That's like one of the hotbeds in the Southwest. So we'll see over the next few weeks. It's not looking good, but I mean, I also think like that chart you just showed, like to me, that just shows like we might not even be through phase 1 yet.
Yeah.
Like if you think about that trend line, that would have to be a steep drop after, what is it, June 18th? That's unlikely. That would be a weird peak. The way, especially as that coincides with reopening.
Yeah,
we are screwed.
We talk about the end of a peak, and I realize that I'm about to sneeze, which is gonna get me laughed at in the chat while we're talking about this. It's like end of one peak, we get another. But what if we didn't? What if the nation just had it in different states at different times? That we had, LA, New York, New Jersey, a few places like that got really hard hit, and they took it as seriously as anyone did. New York totally locked down. Other places sort of did, and that probably helped, but they were locking down before it had really hit their state. They burned up all of the willpower of the state to do anything, and then just as they're opening up, it starts to sweep in. That is, I'm not an expert, I'm not a Fauci or whatever, but that looks like what we're seeing. That the cases in Florida and Texas and Arizona and Oklahoma and a number of other states are going up exactly when they have effectively ended all of the measures that they took to stop it, which is not surprising. Anyway, if you go to this event, please wear a mask. Don't listen to the peer pressure of the other people around you saying that you've fallen to fake news or whatever. And don't just trust the ionization. As much as I appreciate a good ion, please don't just trust the ionization. Could not be more excited to welcome back to the show one of my favorite guests, the former national co-chair of the Bernie 2020 campaign, former Ohio State Senator, and currently the strategic delegate advisor for rootsaction.org. Nina Turner, welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks. Great to be back with you.
Glad to have you here. I know that your organization has a battle on its hands right now. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that your group is doing?
To make sure we keep the Bernie delegates in general across the country motivated and focused, that our movement is still very young, but we are powerful and we have to keep going. But particularly what's happening in California is that the delegates in that great state are pushing for Congressman Ro Khanna to be the 2020 California chair of that delegation, which I certainly believe, along with Roots Action, Our Revolution, PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, that is important because Senator Sanders won that state. And what better show that unity is a real thing, not a fake thing, but that is really real, than to allow those delegates to have a transparent election process and make sure that we get to push Congressman Ro Khanna, that it's real and it's not going to be just a hand-picked person.
Yeah, so, I mean, Bernie dominated in California. Ro was involved in the campaign. So it makes perfect sense. Exactly. So it makes perfect sense he would be involved. What is the argument for Gavin Newsom as a potential alternative? Why would he be the pick alternatively?
Maybe tradition. There's a certain tradition in these state parties, as you know, and tradition sometimes outweighs accountability, transparency, and having a full democratic exercise here. And that is what is needed, especially after what happened in 2016. And if the Democratic Party really wants to show and extend an olive branch to the progressive wing of the party, making sure that Congressman Ro Khanna is the next co-chair of the California delegation, or next chair, of the California delegation, will go a long way. And because Senator Sanders won that state, Congressman Ro Khanna represents that strength in terms of Medicare for all. I mean, John, you know all the issues that progressives have been fighting for and continue to fight for. Who better to lead that and to be the bridge than Congressman Ro Khanna? And John, let me throw out Our Revolution, because that was one of the organizations that I think I neglected to say, but there are a cohort of progressive organizations helping the California delegation push this.
So let's say that you're successful in this push. Congressman Khanna becomes the leader of that delegation. What is the idea of some of what they might be able to accomplish at the convention?
Well, for him to continue to use his voice as he used it on the campaign trail, as he is using it presently in the Congress, he could bring that force, the largest state in the country, the largest delegation, and bring that force to bear at the Democratic convention in August and continue to push for the progressive ideas, which, by the way, John, we keep calling them progressive, but the last time I looked at numbers, is not just progressive, it is what most Americans want, which is universal health care, making sure people are paid a living wage, taking care of the environment, infrastructure, doing something with police reform and criminal justice reform in this country. All of those things, Congressman Ro Khanna continues to fight for, and for him to have that strong voice with the backing of the largest state in the union would be quite a statement.
So you just sort of alluded to the two sort of situations we're in, the pandemic and the protests over police brutality and a reformation of law enforcement. It seems to me, and maybe I'm biased, that if progressive ideas had been being pursued, we might have avoided some of these issues, or we would come out of them much stronger with a health insurance setup that would make sure that everyone could get the care for coronavirus that they need without worrying about going medically bankrupt or anything like that. I'm curious, this moment that we're in, do you feel like the establishment, which doesn't necessarily support a lot of these reforms yet, they might occasionally say that they do, but substantively they don't appear to, do you feel that they're going to be able to sort of get past this time without major changes? Or is there something about what's going on right now that perhaps could be pushed at the convention that is sort of going to be unavoidable, that people have been wised up to what's going on in a way that they can't come back from?
John, it's the progressive movement's job to make sure that they don't get by. As you just laid out, there are almost 45 million people unemployed right now. I believe about 30 million of those people don't have health care because it was attached to their job. And as you laid out, even in the face of a pandemic, now you done got me started, for folks to be heartless, because there's only two ways about this. You can campaign and say you don't believe in universal health care all you want, but then when COVID hits and the illusion is totally gone, where it is patently clear that having health care attached to one's job does not work, baby, something inside of you has to say, I got to change my mind. I need to do a U-turn on this. If you truly, really care about the well-being of the people you're running to serve versus your donor owners. And I call them donor owners deliberately. I mean, something has to snap, John. And heretofore, I have not heard that from the presumptive nominee. So what are you saying, S&T? I'm saying this, is that it is the progressive movement's job to make sure that neoliberal mainline Democrats are uncomfortable this entire time. And if Vice President Biden should win, to make sure that next day we take him to the streets, and that the day that he's sworn in, that we're in the streets, and that nobody gets a free pass just because we like them, just because they're good retail politicians, just because we've said a few kind words about them in the past. That is time out for that. Too many people are suffering, John, right now, real suffering that was always there pre-pandemic. But now nobody can have an excuse that they didn't know. So that's whether we talk about racial injustice, anti-Blackness, to universal health care being a need, to making sure that the essential workers have what they need. Without them, where would we be right now without the store clerk, the people who work in the pharmacy, the doctors, the nurses, the housekeeping personnel, the sanitation workers, you name it, baby. Where would we be without those workers? So this ain't a joke. We're not playing games. People's livelihoods are on the line, John. We can't afford to play games anymore.
I know that it's a bit of a diversion, but you got me thinking about it, so I got to ask you. This is a question I've been asking a lot of the people that I respect most in politics. We have this moment that we only have every couple of years to replace some of the worst politicians with some people that are truly inspiring, that back the sorts of policies and hold the sorts of values that we approve of. Obviously, the pandemic makes it harder to campaign in the way that a lot of primary challengers would like to, and grassroots, bottom-up campaigns want to knock on doors and they want to meet people, like door to door and all that. But at the same time, you're pointing out that for a lot of people, like, these issues were already here, but they're unavoidably real right now. So I'm curious, do you think that some of the difficulties of campaigning could be overpowered by the fact that the policies that these progressive primary challengers in states like New York and Kentucky are pushing right now, that might overpower that? Do you think that this is a situation that might actually make it more likely that some of them might win in primaries like tonight?
I think so. And, Professor Yamada Taylor, to sum up my answer to your question, wrote an article about 2 months ago now, and the title of it was Reality Endorses Bernie Sanders. So reality endorses these progressive candidates, whether folks want to admit it or not. What is happening in real time in our nation and in the world begs the question, the insanity of continuing to do things the same way and expecting a different result. The heartlessness that it would take to look at millions upon millions of people who don't have health care anymore because it was tied to their employer and say to yourself, we shouldn't do a new thing. The heartlessness that it would take to look at how even in the pandemic, John, the folks, the wealthiest folks, the greediest folks in this country are making a profit. I mean, they're not just a profit. They make it because there's nothing necessarily wrong with making a profit. It's about how you make that profit. If you're doing it off the backs and the necks of folks, then something is wrong with it. But that they're the ultra wealthy in this country have seen increases. While almost 45 million people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods, and then people have died, and those who have not died, baby, their lives are different and will be appreciably different for a very long time. So what I'm saying to you, John, is that reality endorses progressive candidates. And year by year by year by year, because we got to play the long game, we're going to overcome. This movement is only a little over 4 years old. We're infants, but baby, we have made some great strides. And I want progressives to understand that. Now we got many more miles to go. We got to organize. We got to unify more. And we got to be ready for these neoliberals. But make no mistake, reality endorses the progressive agenda.
Well, also Congressman Khanna does. So let's loop back for your action with Roots Action. People watching this, is there anything they can do to help increase the odds that Congressman Khanna ends up leading that delegation?
Yes, if they live in California and they're not necessarily a delegate, just reach out and support those delegates, get the word out, use their social media platforms. If they are delegates in the great state of California, make sure that they're ready, that they're at that virtual meeting, and that they cast their ballot for Congressman Ro Khanna. We got to be bold in this moment. And this is not being against anybody else. This is pro Congressman Ro Khanna, so that he can represent the interests, not only of the great state of California, but the interests of the progressive movement at the Democratic National Convention.
Nina Turner, you have a new podcast.
Hello, somebody, John. Hello.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, that refrain became famous at a rally that I did in Queens, and I was just feeling this thing, this whole, as you know, and many of the TYT viewers know, I have this call and response that was born from my years of service in the Black church, having a mother who was a preacher and made my siblings and I go to church 8 days a week. And I was just feeling that thing in Queens that day. And I just said, hello, somebody. And the crowd responded. So hence, Hello Somebody is born. It is a podcast. It's weekly. Please go to wherever you get your podcast, and also Patreon as well. If you want to become a supporter of the podcast, you can do that. It debuted on Juneteenth. As we all know, that is a day of symbolic freedom for the African-American community that has been celebrated for generations, brought to fore by a lady by the name of Mother Opal Lee, who has been pushing to make that a national holiday. I thought, what a great day, the juxtaposition of freedom that my ancestors got to the freedom or lack thereof of Black folks in America today. My first guest, however, is the one and only Michael Render, aka Killer Mike, baby. So if you are a Patreon member, you already have access to that. If you are not, if you are somebody who has subscribed to my show, thank you so very much. You will be able to hear that episode on Thursday. But please join and please support. They can follow me on Twitter at Nina Turner, on Instagram, Nina Turner Ohio, and Facebook, Nina Turner. Hello, somebody, because everybody, baby, is somebody.
So, I mean, the fact that you had Killer Mike on as one of your first guests gives us an idea of sort of where you're coming from. But I'm curious, like, vision-wise, looking forward, who are some of the people you want to talk to? What are some of the goals that you have for the podcast? Like, how do you tie it into the fact that you've worked with a number of different organizations. You're always pushing for change. How does this podcast play into like your life's work?
The goal is to really give voice to working class people in this country, to tell stories from that frame. And even some of the people who will be on my show who are more famous, they have that frame, they have that connection, and they truly understand. To have Michael Render first, Michael Render was an activist before, in his words, before he ever started dancing a jig. And I'm quoting him, and you'll hear him say that on the podcast. He has that connection and those Southern roots to what it means to organize and to be in fellowship with people trying to push for justice. So certainly we'll have him on. Dr. Cornel West, who has been laying it out, John, as you know, all over this country about the choices that we have and that push and what justice looks like in public, to quote him, to people like Susan Sarandon and to other folks. Phil Agnew, one of the co-founders of the Dream Defenders, he just created a new organization called Black Men Build, for Black men to be able to have a space that they can talk to one another and guide one another. So this podcast is going to speak life into people in very much the same way that I continue to do, that I've always done, but especially on the campaign trail. So I want folks to join us. We're going to walk together. And again, as I said before, everybody is somebody. And John, I don't want people to forget that, because sometimes we get caught up in fancy titles. Titles are good. Don't get me wrong. I got a few of my own. They get your phone calls returned. They get you in rooms. Titles are good, but I firmly believe purpose is better. And that is what Hello Somebody is about. Purpose.
So sort of looking forward, let's say, hypothetically, we get to the election. Let's say that Biden wins, based on the polls. It's sort of how it looks like it's going, although, you can't write off any possibility.
Right, yes.
You can't do that. But in the trailer for Hello Somebody, you talk about going from perseverance to resistance. So let's say that hypothetically we end up, Biden's in the office. What does that sort of resistance look like? What is the fight? What is the flavor of the fight going to be if that's the world that we end up in?
Continue to stand up for the value proposition that we laid out, the policies that we are fighting for. That has to be, we cannot fall so in love with a candidate that we don't hold them accountable, that we don't critique them. And unfortunately, that has happened over the last 2 or 3 presidential cycles. Well, no, it's not just that. We fall in love with candidates and we feel like we're going to hurt their feelings if we critique them. No, we need to critique them and we need to push them to do the right thing. And so that resistance part is about the progressive movement coalescing with other co-conspirators and allies, to speak the language of Michael Render, who are ready, willing, and able to not just take it to the streets, but to seize the power. One of the failings of the progressive movement is that we don't like to talk about power. Norman Solomon gave a great critique of what power is and how we must seize that power to do the greatest good. And that's what we need to do. So if Mr. Biden is successful, make no mistake, the progressive movement needs to be out there and ride hard for the entirety of his presidency to make sure that our issues are on the table and that those issues are passed, that they are activated. And if they are not, there has to be a consequence. And it's not just the presidency, John. It's the people in the Congress in both chambers. It's who our governors are, who serves in the state legislature. We really don't talk about the state legislature, John, and we're going to be in for a whole awakening because the Democratic Party is not putting a lot of effort in the legislature. And as somebody who served, I understand what it means to serve at a time when you have a census, and also to serve at a time when lines are going to be redrawn. And we're going to wake up because we didn't put the efforts in making sure that we have progressives winning those races in the state legislature and having those lines drawn in a way where politicians yet again get to pick their constituents instead of the other way around. And so it's all levels of government. That was a long way for me to say that this change that we need, the creating of a better nation that we need, does not rise and fall on the presidency. The presidency is just one aspect of that, a very big aspect of that. But we need to be in the streets on all levels of government, pushing these elected officials, the people who we give our power to advocate on our behalf, to do our bidding and not just the bidding of major donors.
Yeah, you're 100% right about the state government. Thankfully there are organizations like Our Revolution and others that are paying attention to that. The National Democratic Party seems to barely even care, and I think that is a fatal weakness. And on Congress, what I've been saying for a long time is I want to get to a point where I can't name all of the good politicians in one breath.
Absolutely.
And we're not there yet.
No,
I can remember them all. I don't want to be able to remember them all.
But we can get there, John. I'm with you on that.
I hope so. Nina Turner, as always, thank you for joining us. Everybody, check out Hello Somebody, available, like Nina said, at all the places you can find podcasts. Thank you so much, Nina.
Thanks, John, as always.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.